Guys, is the EAC facing a diplomatic Armageddon? If you don't believe me, see for yourself. That's real fury there. In Kiswahili, we call it hamaki. Not a good thing. For a while now, the EAC has been on autopilot, only kept on track by some seasonal goodwill, a little good vibe there, and of course, the beautiful EAC anthem, which urges us to linda jumuiya yetu. Now, the Jumuiya's version of integration is challenged by the significant disparities among member states. While economic and infrastructural collaborations have been the bedrock of this collaboration, there is something else that is threatening to create an emergency: the notable lack of consensus on fundamental democratic principles and the progressive backsliding on human rights. Across the East African political landscape, everyone seems to ignore everyone else's systemic problems. But for how long? You know, someone in your chama is an abductor, but you're like, it's okay. Another can torture and dump people at the border, but you're like, si niliwaambia msiende huko. Ona sasa. In some cases, we even help because they are our dear friends in the community.
Waziri, do you take responsibility for the continued incarceration of Dr. Kizza Besigye in a Ugandan jail?
No, I do not. I don't take responsibility, and Kenya cannot take responsibility, because that is a process that is going on in Uganda under the authority of the government of Uganda. So we cannot take responsibility for that.
Please explain the circumstances under which he got to that jail, because he was here.
I think it's best left as it is now.
Yes, ni sisi tulimpeana, lakini afadhali tusiongelee hiyo story, tutaharibu biashara na jirani. Kile tunataka ni amani. All right, I was trying to be Mudavadi there, but clearly not working. However, because in the EAC, silence is golden, and friendship is measured by how well you keep your mouth shut when your neighbor is misbehaving. Shh. This don't rock the boat, see no evil, hear no evil mentality didn't start yesterday. Let's take a trip down memory lane, back to when Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania tried living under one roof in the late 1960s. The EAC began having serious problems in the 1970s, especially after Idi Amin ousted Milton Obote. Because nothing tests a throuple or marriage like someone suddenly redecorating without asking. Spoiler, it ended in a dramatic breakup in 1977. Why? Well, Jomo Kenyatta, Julius Nyerere, and Idi Amin just couldn't agree on what kind of household they were running. Picture this, 3 roommates sharing a cramped bedsitter, each with their own distinct vibe. Kenya, under Kenyatta, was the flashy capitalist, rolling up in a fancy car and always with the deepest pockets. Back then, size still mattered. Uganda's Idi Amin was the wild card, His economy wasn't nearly as big as he was, and that made him furious. His erratic moods and confrontational style were like blasting loud music at 3 a.m., just when everyone else wanted some peace and quiet. Then there was Tanzania's Nyerere, the idealist, trying to keep everyone in check with a dose of socialism and some stern austerity. You know, playing the responsible roommate, trying to make rent stretch. Jameni wase, tufanye savings, hatuwezi kula nyama kila siku. You know how it is with socialism, yeah? Everything was attempted, but eventually this all-boys gang just had to wind down. By 1977, the breakup was official and everyone was told, oh yeah, kila mtu akatafute keja, keja tatosha vitu zake. Nenda, toka hapa.
Karibu. Aha. Mzuri sana.
Can you tell us, sir, if you discussed the possibility of a meeting of the East African Community Authority?
What do you mean, community authority?
The 3 presidents.
3 presidents. Well, that is, well, we are all together anyway. We have not been apart. The work of the community is still going ahead well.
The EAC's collapse wasn't just about big egos, mismatched ideologies, or even economic imbalances. No, a lot of it was actually a lack of trust, coupled with impunity. Fast forward to today, the EAC is back, of course with a lot more nations, but the ghosts of 1977 still remind us unity takes more than a catchy anthem. We need respect for rights of the citizens of these countries, and that includes political rights. It can be that when the rights of someone like Tundu Lissu in Tanzania or Kizza Besigye in Uganda are trampled, East African leaders lie low and hold their breath, careful not to be heard lest they be asked to comment. In the year 2000, when the EAC was relaunched, it carried a so-called fresh vision, the same way men relaunch New Year resolutions and abandon them by Valentine's Day once they realize they can't be stingy anymore. You need some babes in your life. The EAC was relaunched with pillars like regional peace, economic integration, shared prosperity. However, what the founders of the new EAC forgot to do was define a bit more what each of these pillars meant. When you say regional peace, do you mean citizens must live in peace and progress, or that leaders should be left alone in peace to do whatever they want? And what of shared prosperity? Is shared prosperity only a good thing when we can exchange goods but not entertain each other's opinion on human rights and basic political freedoms? That the only thing we can get from each other are onions, tomatoes, molasses, and njugu. Being partners within the EAC means that we are in this together, for better, for worse. And it doesn't matter whether your partner's suit is fitting, the love should be unconditional. Unless we want to say this EAC thing is not working. Watu wende nyumbani kwao, tujuliane kwa simu from a distance. Yeah, which would be a tragedy. Your Excellency, Madam Suluhu, rudia hiyo kauli tena tusikie.
Tumeanza kuona mtiririko au mwenendo wa wanaharakati ndani ya region yetu hii kuanza kuvamia na kuingilia mambo yetu huku. Sasa kama kwao wameshadhibitiwa, wasije kutuharibia huku. Tusitoe nafasi. Walishaharibu kwao, walishavuruga kwao. Nchi iliyobaki haijaharibika. Watu wako na usalama na amani na utulivu ni hapa kwetu.
Okay, two fundamental questions for President Samia. Kwani umefurahi vile tumedhibitiwa huku Kenya jamani? And secondly, just because tumedhibitiwa here in Kenya, we shouldn't visit Tanzania and give advice, surely? Yes, tumedhibitiwa huku Kenya. Ndio sababu tunaomba wa Tanzania wasidhibitiwe vivyo hivyo. Maybe the Kenyan activists just wanted to come to Tanzania to say, please, msikue kama sisi huko Kenya. Madam President, that's how solidarity works. Just because I am bad at relationships doesn't mean I can't give advice. I can still say, bro, leave that woman. She's a narcissist. She will kill you at night with an attitude. At this rate, the EAC is beginning to feel like a polygamous household. You're free to visit any house, just not during meal times. Looking for ugali in the wrong house could leave you with injuries. Why are we always okay to transact business, visit each other any other time, but once politics and elections come into play, everyone suddenly becomes paranoid? Our primal instincts become heightened. Suddenly, abductions and torture become normal, and no one says a thing. Not the current head of EAC, and definitely not a single discussion in our respected parliaments. Not even the East Africa Legislative Assembly, EALA. Why are these institutions here anyway, if they are dormant and unresponsive to the needs of East African citizens? Take a moment and think about the East Africa Court of Justice. Rumor has it that it can't sit regularly because it has no money. And even when they sit, there is essentially no meaningful agenda. So how will they attack anything of the nature of accountability for violation of rights? Your guess is as good as mine. And then comes the East Africa Legislative Assembly, EALA. Ideally, it exists to represent the people. But which people? Because to many, EALA looks and feels less a legislative assembly and more like, well, a literal daycare for the children of political royalty, especially for Kenya. I mean, you know them. That's what it seems to be. So yes, we have an East African community, but do we actually have a community? If EALA doesn't discuss civil liberties in any meaningful way, and the East Africa Court of Justice fails to take a stand when democracy is being strangled, and the EAC leaders can't spare time to deliberate on matters as significant as political freedoms, then what are we? As soon as East African citizens notice that they have common pains and political discomforts, it will be hard to sell the agenda of the EAC in its current dysfunctional form to the expanding youth population. And if we are sharing the pain of abductions across the nations of East Africa, the citizens of this region might as well choose to share in the struggle to emancipate themselves. A brother suffering in Tanzania hurts just as much as a sister from Uganda who is hurting. Same thing with an unarmed protester disappearing completely in Kenya, and the only thing we hear from our leaders is all those who are abducted have been returned home safely and it won't happen again. Same thing as, honey, I took all your Sako money and entertained my friends with it, but trust me, it won't happen again. Sawa, babe. Well, I know those two situations aren't the same, but you get the point, right? The level of ridiculousness in this East Africa is just baffling. Let people move around peacefully within East Africa. Let them engage democratically, benchmark with each other, spread best practices, because we are one people. The citizens of East Africa don't see borders. It's the leaders who do. If Kenya delays in constituting its elections body, IEBC, what happens to people who are in the mood to vote and elections haven't been called yet? That is why some Kenyans in Busia hear there are elections in Uganda and they're like, hey, Fuchs, angalau wacha tupige kura.
Wadau, breaking news. Ugandan election has been cancelled. Ugandan's election has been cancelled. Do you know the reason behind this? Kenyans. Guys, apparently it is said kwamba kuna Wakenya wame move into Uganda kwenda kuvote. And the purpose of this, wanasema ni wanataka watoe mzee kwa kitu.
Yeah. I know the idea of crossing into another country to vote like it's your village. I mean, surely it sounds ridiculous. But hey, don't be too quick to judge. Look at it as a harmless act of political tourism. Kenyans just want to know if party elections in Uganda are as chaotic as ours. And if need be, they can cast the decisive vote and prevent a stalemate. And to visit a friendly neighboring country within the EAC, I don't think we should be needing permission from anyone. The same way wildebeests don't ask for permission when they feel like, crossing over to the Serengeti and just chill. Even the tourism matron seen here working out has no option but to allow such unlimited flexibilities in cross-border movement. This is what I'm getting at, good people, that as East Africa citizens, we do so well when left alone without our leaders. For example, Kenya depends on the prayers of Tanzanians. Like, there's no question about that. With the many problems that Kenya has, we essentially run on prayers of our Tanzanian brethren, and we love them all. From Rose Muhando, whose gospel vibrations keep us alive, to Faustine Munishi, who is always in the Kenyan wilderness, but for some reason, our snakes never touch him. And I still haven't mentioned Christina Shusho, whose prayers are delivering more for the region than the entire EAC secretariat. Hiyo ndio Afrika Mashariki tunayoitaka. One without borders. Boundaries. And that's PressPoint for this week.
Tumeanza kuona mtiririko au mwenendo wa wanaharakati ndani ya region yetu hii kuanza kuvamia na kuingilia mambo yetu huku. Sasa kama kwao wameshadhibitiwa, wasije kutuharibia huku. Tusitowe nafasi. Walishaharibu kwao, walishavuruga kwao. Nchi iliyobaki haijaharibika. Watu wako na usalama na amani na utulivu ni hapa kwetu.